Daily Faceoffs hockey insider from a hotel room in Boston. Frank, thanks so much for joining us today. How you been? We haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I'm good. Good to be back with you guys. Been too long, so happy to do that and to be seen. And yeah, I've been hot on the Dakota Joshua story. I reported earlier today on Daily Faceoff Live that Saturday not going to happen, but I think next week, I think potentially that Thursday game looks pretty good for him to come back. So either Tuesday or Thursday, sometime next week for Dakota Joshua is very likely.
Frank, we were just talking about it, but just the impact that he's going to make on the Canucks lineup, especially with what they've struggled with so far this year. Just everything he's been through. This is our first chance to talk to you since he came out with his cancer diagnosis. Just like, what is Dakota Joshua going to bring to this team when he gets back?
He brings a presence first and foremost. He's a worker, and that really matters to Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff. He's someone that is dependable, which is also really important. You know what you're getting from Dakota Joshua night in and night out. Might not always be the most talent, but he's bringing his effort every night, which is, if you're talking about abilities, dependability, reliability are two of the biggest abilities that you can have in the NHL, because everyone has ability. So when you look at him coming back, I wonder if he really, I don't think he cures some of the issues that the Canucks face, because I think it'll certainly help. But to me, it's still certainly getting out of their own end is hugely problematic. And that part he can assist with, but he's not behind the goal line moving the puck up more often than not. So that's where they need help.
Speaking of those breakout issues, back end issues, it was interesting to see Timothy Liljegren had sort of fallen out of favor in Toronto, looked like a potentially distressed asset, not on a great contract, and yet the Leafs were still able to get positive value. They got a third and a sixth round pick for him. Does that tell you anything about how you expect the D market to shape up, where maybe there is expected to be a shortage of decent defensemen, and that it may be a seller's market there?
I would hesitate to call it positive value. I would really, if anything, we're talking neutral. Like, those assets aren't helping the Leafs. They didn't have to pay. They didn't have to retain. Maybe old friend Matt Benning could, fill in on spot duty if need be. But with Yanni Hakanpää coming back, the Leafs, they had to get moving. So they had exactly one team on the line in San Jose. They had other teams that had cursory conversations, but no one that put anything on the table outside of San Jose, and the Leafs had to act while they still had someone on the line. So their roster situation kind of forced their hand, but in terms of the holistic view of the market, Harm, I think it's really more of, I don't want to say an indictment, but it's really more of an indication of where the rest of the league sees Timothy Liljegren's game at this point. The market will be incredibly thin, and at the end of the day is still a 25-year-old right shot defenseman that had shown promise at some point, calendar year ago. But the book was out, and I think San Jose is like, hey, we could use another guy. We could use someone that has NHL experience. We could use someone that we could potentially rehab their game. And by the way, we really it's not a detriment for them that he had term on his deal. It's a positive because they've still got to fill out their lineup again next season. So they don't have to pay much in order to get a guy that they might be able to turn around. So I think that's sort of the total perspective on the deal.
Frank, it's our poll question today. Do you think the Canucks are going to make a trade for a defenseman? You talked about their struggles moving the puck out of their own end. Do you think they're going to make a trade for a defenseman before December 1st?
Well, I don't want to put a timeline on it of December 1st, but I think they're going to be trading for a defenseman in the foreseeable future. I'll say that. And it's for the reasons that I mentioned. Their inefficiency moving the puck. It's a staple, non-negotiable of Rick Tocchet's system and structure. And it really significantly erodes once you get past the first pair of this defense core. Now, in the very short term, and this is part of the reason why I don't want to put a timeline on it, Patrick Allvin has been making calls around the league. There's zero doubt about that. He is the league's most aggressive general manager, and he's always looking to make this team better, which is such a feather in this organization's cap. But for right now, their focus is to get their full complement of players on the ice. I mean, that's the other thing about this year. And I guess say what you want about Derek Forbort, but they haven't had a healthy full roster with Dakota Joshua and Forbort and everyone in the lineup yet. So let's see what that looks like. And then the Canucks are going to assess from there.
Frank, what have you heard about the organization's, like, where are they at in terms of their concern level with Elias Pettersson, and what do they think needs to happen for him to get back on track?
I mean, there's zero doubt that there is a level of concern. How high that is, I couldn't pinpoint because you're never going to get an honest answer. That said, this now stretches and spans over 2 seasons. The levels and acceptable excuses are kind of out the window now. It's not about finding better players to play with him or the knee or whatever it might have been at some point that you might have been able to ask or raise a question or concern about. It is one guy who's making $11.6 million a year for the next 7 years after this one that cannot be a passenger and needs to be a driver. He's had quite clearly a crisis of confidence. He's someone that makes the routine play look more difficult. And frankly, he's someone that looks disengaged. I don't know if that's a polite way to say it, but I think when you look at his game, to me, the way that he throws away pucks, the way that he doesn't at times engage in battles, and a sort of soft approach to play around the net, this isn't the guy we all know and watched burst into this league and become a force. This isn't a guy that would snipe corners instead of throw muffins onto the net. I don't know what happened. I can't give you a reason or explanation, but there's no doubt that at this point, basically 40 games into a sample size now, that the Canucks would be concerned.
Yeah. It's a heavy topic of conversation on our show.
You don't say.
Weeks. Yeah. I keep looking, like, we just dove into his NHL Edge data yesterday over at Canucks Army. Our pal Jeff Patterson kind of looked at it, like, the skating, and you say disengaged. Someone in our chat said that's the perfect way to put it, disengaged. Like, again, I wonder about the injuries, right? Like, we've heard about the wrist for a while. We've obviously heard him talk about his knee as well last year. Like, I wonder about those, but the NHL Edge data doesn't really lie. Like, he's not skating with the same speed. He's not skating with the same bursts over 20 miles per hour. And that's just undeniable at this point, that he's just not looking like the same player that we know. Anything you wanted to add about the injury theory or anything?
No, not so much about the injury. I mean, look, I've been super clear about the way people felt in the aftermath of what he said. They were flabbergasted and they were like, that doesn't explain what we saw. So, and also not a valid excuse. Do you really think the Canucks would have put their prized $90+ million player in harm's way and continued to play him? That's crazy talk. And I want to be clear about one thing that I said. When I say disengaged, I don't want someone to misinterpret that and me think that I'm saying that he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that at all. In fact, I think part of what might be his issue, if I were to diagnose it from 2,400 miles away, is it's almost like he cares too much about what his game looks like, what people say about him, what coverage like this appears like. I just don't know how you fix that. Like, we are past the point of no return. when it comes to wanting to sign up to be part of that and be in the mix. And I didn't really see any of that the first chunk of his career. Like, why would that pop up now, if that makes any sense?
That's fair.
Looking at the team as a whole, still really early, less than 10 games in, but what's your initial take on what you've seen from the Canucks so far and sort of viewing them league wide? Are you on board with them as a Stanley Cup contender? Or are you a little bit less bullish on them? How do you rate them so far?
Not on board with them as a Stanley Cup contender. First off, and just for clarity, and in case anyone wants to say I'm a Canucks hater, I'm not. I honestly don't care who wins or loses. This job is way stressful enough without that. I would say I keep a really small circle of 5 teams at any given time. It's living, breathing. We started a new segment on Daily Faceoff Live at the end of every month, the inner circle. Who's in that circle? The Canucks aren't one of 5 teams right now that are in that for me. And any honest, objective Canucks fan would probably nod and agree and say, I got you. Holistically, right now, this Canucks team is not as good as they were last year. They're not as good as the team that ended in Game 7. They're not as good as the team even before Patrick Allvin really started making a ton of moves. They have upside and promise. They've had a fantastic story with Kevin Lankinen. They are competitive. They are a 100-point team. They are a firm playoff team, but they've got some work to do to get into that next echelon of teams.
Do you think, like, and again, I'm not going to ask you to go out and say, okay, they got to do this, this, and this, but like, how far are they from that? Like, are they a top 4 defenseman away from being in that inner circle? And I mean, obviously you got to see more from your star players as well, and I'm sure that goes into your evaluation, but like, how far away are they?
Yeah, at least one, and probably like a healthy Thatcher Demko.
Fair.
Not to say Kevin Lankinen can't help or can't carry the ball or whatever it might be. I guess goalies have won the cup that have his skill set for sure. I think it's at the very bare minimum, one more top 4 defenseman, and preferably someone, again, with all the attributes that we just talked about. It's not just skating fast. It's moving the puck fast. It's being quick with your mind. It's you can't just be big. You can't just be Vinny Desharnais. And I said that. Go watch any of the Oilers coverage. Anyone that said he was getting a massive deal in the summer, I just said he has serious limitations. And you guys have seen that already to start the year, and they're working with him, and he could get better, and maybe he turns a corner. But you probably are what you are at a certain point when you're that age and you're that big. So I didn't, no revisionist history here. Everything that I just said to you is exactly what I said in my season preview. There have been some really good moments to start and some really ugly moments. And I think everyone probably feels a little different about this team. Had they not blown 2 third-period leads to start the season, you have a little bit more of a cushion. And I think generally just the record feels a little bit better. But I linked up with the Canucks in Chicago. I watched them as they came out east. They definitely looked a lot better. But it's going to be consistency that wins the day. And they're not at that point yet.
Frank, just before we let you go, final one from me. Just from a league-wide perspective, your biggest surprise so far this year? Like, we've talked a lot about the Nashville Predators, but they've started to turn around seemingly. Your biggest surprise to start the new season?
There's a few. One, that the Bruins have been so bad and struggled to score. Did not see this start coming from the Minnesota Wild. I think the LA Kings have exceeded expectations. My guess is, oddly enough, the Oilers probably play better without Connor McDavid for the next couple weeks as they try and get their heads screwed on straight. I think everything else kind of is like within the parameters of like what the mean would look like, if that makes any sense. There's always outliers here or there. It's still kind of reaction season. It's hard to get hyped up about anything in the first month of the year when you know that so many vets in this league, almost they don't really start playing for keeps until November. But we're there now, and these things, starts of seasons for the first 3 weeks, you could be anything. The Calgary Flames looked like they weren't going to lose. But after you get a month in, I think things really start to bake in and crystallize in terms of what you end up being.
Harmon and I made a bet. I bet that the Flames would make the playoffs.
You bet what?
I bet that the Flames would make the playoffs after their start. I was like, they're going to sneak in.
And it was like even odds. Like I didn't have, you know what I mean? Like you didn't even.
Quads. Come on.
I was like, this is the
I thought you
easiest
would
bet
learn
I'm gonna win in my
from
life.
our bet last year.
Yeah, we still gotta. Are you planning on coming out to Vancouver during the season, or are you
at
waiting
some
until
point?
playoffs? Okay, cool. I'm not looking forward to it. For those that don't remember, Frank and I. What was our bet, Frank? What did we bet? Actually, I can't remember. All I know is I get a
pied or something.
I know I get pied, but I don't remember what we bet. Like, was it another lopsided one where I probably
Yeah,
should
you
have taken
said
odds?
the Canucks were going to win the series.
Ah, yes. Game 7. They get Brock Besser. Maybe things are different. I don't know. Anyways, Harmon, go ahead.
One more from me. I'm curious to get your take on like who your inner circle is as far as contenders and whether they're in it or not. I also would love to get your take on Vegas, their hot start, and are you buying them as? I mean, they're a team that I think sort of got overlooked heading into the season, maybe because of some of the forward talent that they lost, and yet they've been scoring a pile of goals.
Yeah, so that's the perfect segue to my inner circle because Vegas is in there. I think they're a really good team. I think they've got the horses to be there. I think they've got value goaltending in their tandem. There's really not much that, and they might honestly to this point in the season might have the best line in hockey. They're formidable like they are, and they've won before, so they understand. So Vegas, I still have Edmonton in there, even with the start. I have the Rangers. I have Winnipeg and
Calgary.
Yeah, no, that's not it. And I have the Dallas Stars. So interestingly enough, no one from the Atlantic yet. And people were like, I'm sure people would hear that and say, well, Florida, like 2 straight cups off to a fine start this season. What's your issue with the Panthers? They've been pretty mercurial this year, hot and cold. I know their record's good, but they've had some ugly nights. It is impressive that they've played well without Barkov when he was out and Matthew Tkachuk for a couple games. I don't know how they've made magic with it, but I'm still not a believer in Florida's defense after Ekblad or Montour and Ekman Larson departed. So still, I think jury out, a lot of hockey played by the Panthers, but could certainly find themselves into that living, breathing list soon.
Frank, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it, and we will chat with you soon for sure. Thanks so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Have a good one.